All right, so we're live. Jamie, thank you so much for joining me this morning.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
And welcome to the third episode of Doing My Best podcast with me, Nic Consani, and our guest, like I said, Jamie. You were one of the first people I actually thought of when starting to think about this podcast and who I wanted to have on. Just
Oh,
love your energy and enthusiasm for learning and even enthusiasm for software development or product development that can be bleak sometimes, and I really jumped onto your enthusiasm as well as just the posts all the time on LinkedIn of you trying helping others. You're always helping others find new jobs or congratulating them on the things that they've done. So I just loved your energy, and that's why I wanted you on the podcast. So why don't you give us a little bit of background, who you are, what you do, that kind of thing.
sure. My name's Jamie Bernard. I'm a consultant. I tell people I do a lot of PowerPoint and talking for a living,
Yeah.
but I largely spend time in the product management space, a lot in strategy. So really looking at how are we making investment decisions and that sort of thing. I've been in software development in some way, shape, or form for multiple decades. So I don't know if I should quantify that, but I obviously started when I was like 5. But at this point, in my career, I am really finding a lot of joy in seeing others grow and seeing others succeed. And, if you've spent any time in software development, it is not a one person show. It's, just like a baseball game, right? You can have the best first baseman in the world, but if the rest of the team isn't able to level up and showcase their skill, then you're not going to win the game. And so, to that end, that's kind of where my perspective is and where I've spent a lot of time in creating organizations, helping redesign organizations and rethink as, we are evolving. There are a lot of organizations that haven't. So I'm spending a lot of time nurturing people through implementation of product management, implementation of different org design and that sort of thing. So that's sort of me in a nutshell. As a non-professional, I'm a big time gamer. I absolutely love being on the PlayStation Network. I read all the time. So I spend time in the mornings reading some type of nonfiction. And then I read absolute garbage in the afternoon or in the evenings so that, I can unplug my brain and just let it play. And I also enjoy doing logic puzzles and those at home escape rooms, stuff like that. So I'm
Oh,
a
cool.
giant kid when I'm not locked in.
Yeah, me too. I love the game as well. It's why I have to put that aside. I have to set
Yes.
time for me to game so that I can focus on the rest of my stuff. Yeah, you said PlayStation. So is that do you do PC gaming and Xbox and all that as well, or just PlayStation?
I used to, but I have these little hands, and
Yeah.
in a fantastic study of usability, Sony seems to have created the controller that's easier for my hands to use.
Yep. Yep.
And so I spend a lot of time on that. I do have a Switch, so when I travel, I'll take that
Cool.
with me. But the context switching between the different controls is always a joy. But yeah, I don't do any PC. I can't because mentally I equate my PlayStation, or excuse me, my PC is for work
With work. Yep.
and my console is not. So for me, that having that division is very important. So yeah, but vast amount of my majority of my gaming time is on the PlayStation Network.
Oh, very cool. I didn't know that, so that's awesome. Yeah, I'm a big PC gamer. Got into it in the pandemic, and built my own computer and things, and so
Oh,
that's
nice.
something I'd never done before. But getting back to the podcast, you talked about helping organizations change for the better, and I think that really starts with the paradigm shift, right? This mindset that you've come to, and that I learned from Nexient, and that's where we both met each other, was at the previous company Nexient, now Launch at NTT Data, and they had me read the Fixed Mindset to Growth Mindset book before joining, and I was never really introduced to that idea of this fixed mindset and growth mindset and what that is. And I learned a ton about it, and I loved that philosophy. Do you want to give a little definition of what each are and how you utilize that to help organizations change for the better?
So it's pretty straightforward. Fixed mindset basically means I have all of the skill and capability that I'm going to have. And this is who I am and how I navigate the world, how I navigate my job. And I'm not going to learn anything more, right? It's just This is where I'm at. Whereas a growth mindset is exactly what it sounds like. I can learn, I can evolve, I can change my skill set, I can learn a new skill set, I can consume different ways of thinking or different ways of working, and I can learn a different mindset and maybe apply my current skills in a different way. And so the two, it's really important, especially when hiring and when trying to do any kind of transformation, to suss out who you're working with,
Yeah.
because that that fixed mindset is really, really difficult. You can have the most brilliant person in the world, but if they don't see that change not only is inevitable, but there's value in improving and changing the with the world, you can really cause a lot of harm to an organization. And so making sure that you're working with individuals and companies on really identifying where they are and whether you can kind of unstick someone or an organization is critical first step before you make any kind of moves like that or any kind of recommendations. So really it's just the, can I improve and can I grow, or am I stuck and this is just where I'm at? That's
Yeah, and
how I use those.
yeah, and I've been watching a lot of Big Bang Theory recently, and actually just came to mind that Sheldon is kind of in the fixed mindset in the first few seasons. Although he's a genius, he doesn't think there's anything else out there for him that he thinks is necessary to learn. And as the seasons go on, he gets into relationships that are outside of education, outside of physics, and he's then able to absorb the second half of himself, be a genius as well as be a sociable, helpful person in society. I
Yeah.
think I fall into that sometimes too, with sticking in the fixed mindset. Have you ever? How do you get out of it when you find yourself falling into the fixed mindset and get yourself back into the growth mindset?
I think people need permission to feel their feelings. And I wish more people would give themselves permission to kind of feel the feelings. And what I mean by that is, in my experience, anytime somebody is sort of stuck in that fixed mindset, there's always an underlying reason. I have yet to really come across somebody who is just so staunchly, nope, I'm not going to change. We're not going to do this. This is ridiculous. I haven't run across anyone who can't be moved, so to say. But understanding what is the cause of that is really important. And I will tell you that this, even in my own case, the cause is always fear. It's always the unknown, right? Humans
Yeah,
don't like to not know things, even though, spoiler alert, we don't know things.
yeah,
Like there's a whole ton of stuff we don't know. And so the predictability of the day to day is comforting to us, right?
mm,
And when something comes along like a merger, an acquisition, or a disruptor in the organization or in the marketplace comes along, there's always that first jolt of fear where your day to day got a whole lot less predictable and your future they got a whole lot less predictable, and that's very scary. And I think some people will choose to dig in their heels as a little bit of denial, like, oh, it'll pass, it's a fad or whatever, or oh, this new person is here, they're going to do a regime change, this always happens, it never changes anything, whatever, right? So you
yeah,
get that cynicism that comes in, always fear underlying. And even for myself, like there's always this existential crisis moment of, are my skills still relevant? What can I learn? Especially with AI on the horizon, there's a ton of fear around, oh, my job's going to become obsolete because a computer is going to be able to do it, right? So I always give myself permission to kind of feel those feelings and just process through them and really try to poke at, what's really going on here? Why am I having this kind of reaction? And then after I just kind of let that fill out for a little bit, right? Because not everything can stay dialed to 11 forever. And so as that temperature starts to decrease, I try to think about, okay, what about that was so scary to me?
mm,
And if I think about AI, um, the scary part is, oh my gosh, am I even going to be useful now, right? In
right.
coming helping companies strategize. And the reality is, after I think about that for a second, go use ChatGPT for an hour,
Yeah,
and you will
exactly.
see really quickly that it's not going to replace you, but it can be a wonderful tool to really give you a starting point, or it can augment things. It can add, to what you're building out. So
Right.
to the answer to the question is really get to the heart of why I'm feeling that way. 9 times out of 10, it's some level of fear. Really poke at what about it is scary, and then go demystify it. Sometimes it retains the scariness, and you have to take a little more drastic action, because defanging it isn't always going to be the answer. But if it is more drastic action, really objectively accepting that and finding out what of this can I control and what can I not control is really an important next step for me. Because, if I can't control it, I don't spend a ton of time in it. I accept it for what it is, and what are the actions I can take to navigate through.
Yeah, I like that a lot. Permission to feel, right? Give yourself permission to actually assess the feelings that you're having. And most of the time, like you said, it is fear. And that's the same thing I've been dealing with kind of with this podcast. It's all brand new. I don't know how to edit. I didn't have all of the technology. And so I've had to learn everything on the fly because I know my end goal is valuable and I'm passionate about the topic. So if I take the time to learn all these things, and that gets rid of the fear. And then you said go demystify it. And I think that's the part that's kind of the most challenging sometimes is if it is so scary, sometimes you just have to jump right into the deep end, right? You can't wait for it, like you said, for it to figure itself out. Sometimes you just got to jump into the deep end.
Exactly.
But
And it's okay to ask for help. And that's the other piece of it is, sometimes from a consulting standpoint, that's what I'm there to do, is
yeah,
to help demystify it and to help, people find their place in the new ways of working or in a new organization or opportunity inside, the new thing. Maybe that skill is obsolete, but the 17 other things you're really, really good at, those can be put to use.
yeah. And so perfect segue into the next topic that I'd like to talk about, which is like building a team and or support group. Like you just said, sometimes it's good to ask for help. Building that team around you, both professionally and personally, to be successful. How do you build that team around you and build that team growth mindset together so that you can constantly fail fast and then get back to what's working well and tackle, and provide value quickly?
Some of the best advice I was given early on in my career was never assume you're the smartest person in the room. And that was, I think about it all the time, anytime I'm in a conversation, because the reality is I'm rarely the smartest person in the room.
Yeah.
And so to that end, there are things that I am good at and there are things that I am not good at. And being able to build a good team requires, in my opinion, two key things. Number one, self awareness. What are you good at? What are your superpowers? What are you not good at? And number two, what does the situation need? Is it like from a consulting standpoint? I won't always go directly after the people who are just really good at creating backlogs or something like that, right? If I'm building a product management organization, there's some set of table stakes that, yes, these boxes just have to be checked by everyone, but it's up to me to assess, okay, what is our value proposition? What are we bringing to the marketplace and promising our customers?
Yeah.
And what am I good at here? And what am I not good at? And what should a team like this be good at? And so, what I like to do is make sure that I have as clear of an understanding as I can have on what I believe those answers are, plunking myself where I belong and
Hmm.
where I can thrive, and then finding the people who are really good at the things that I'm not so that I can learn from them, and then making sure that they have ownership, accountability, and direction based on the strategy so that they can execute with me out of their way. I tell people, you point me like a cannon, like, point and fire at roadblocks so that they can do the things that they need to do. So when I'm building a team, I try to make sure that it's fit for purpose, that their skills are complementary to mine, but I also want it to be a Venn diagram. I want to make sure that it's not just that they're good at what I'm bad at and, not great at what I'm good at. I still want us to have a solid thread of this is the core set of skills that we all can go and just execute. And
Yep.
then that way we've created some differences to where people can shine in the areas that they really like to shine in. They learn to lead without having to be, here's the stuff that you have to do, and making sure that there's a clear strategy with outcomes so that as they're starting to formulate the way that they want to navigate the team, we connect on that so that we're moving together as a unit that is fit for purpose for our value proposition in the marketplace. But it's not, I don't have to stand in front with the microphone and the spotlight all of the time. There's enough
Yep.
sunshine for everyone. But making sure that that outcome and that strategy, that's incumbent upon me as a leader, and course correcting whenever any of us get it wrong is also important. When I get it wrong, it's important for me to own that, take accountability, and say, okay, folks, let's regroup around this. This is what we've learned. This was a fail. Let's mark that down and learn from it and move forward. And then, do the same for those in my charge. If they screw up, let's talk about it. Let's figure out what the learning was and what the impact was, and then we'll deal with it and move forward. I don't have very much patience for a punitive environment. I have
Mhm.
no patience for it, actually. I think it's BS.
And somehow
I mean, unless
you,
you're like, breaking the law.
yeah, yes. And I haven't seen that type of environment prior to Nexient. And coming into Nexient, it was so refreshing, and it felt that you were given the freedom to be creative in your own way, to be successful in the way that you felt you were going to be successful. And how do you get comfortable with that if you're a leader who is kind of micromanaging or is always on top of your team and having, not letting them kind of figure out what their strengths are? And how do you get a leader to move from, that mindset of I need to be in charge of everything and be the head of everything, to letting people do their own work and be creative in the way that they're completing their tasks, and giving them the freedom to accomplish the goals?
Everyone, I mean, I will say everyone because I'm just assuming everyone struggles
Yeah.
with this. Whenever you are climbing the ladder, there are two key moments of change from individual contributor into management and from management/middle management into executive. Those two transitions are really hard because when you become a manager, it becomes less about what you do well, even though you're responsible for usually still getting the things done. You have to make sure that your team executes because that's your job.
Yeah.
And people who are new to that are used to being the good job doer, not the good job inspirer. And so part of what I really focus on when I'm working with people in that manager space is let's look at the tactics as A, like this is where we're starting from. B is where we want to get to within the appropriate time frame and with appropriate checkpoints. Give people the ability to do B and shut up. And if you have to connect once a week on like where are you, that's fine, but make it agended, very specific, and stay out of the way. Because the truth of the matter is that you cannot be a good manager if you're trying to do everyone's job. The people who you're managing need to be given the space and safety to do the work. And so that's really what I'll focus on with managers is while yes, there is some doing that you're accountable for, it's up to you to make sure that they are successful. And if they're not successful, you're not successful. So I find it really important to help teach that idea. Also, whenever I'm building a role like that, like we are all driven by what are we getting paid? What are the things that I have to do to be successful? And so part of those objectives that I'll create for somebody in those positions is your team has to achieve these things. And some of those successes are individual and not for the manager. Like your person needs to be capable of giving an executive presentation. Because what this does is it incentivizes the manager to get out of the way and make sure that that person does a good job and is good at what they're doing so that they can, they can be seen as kind of a leader builder, right? And that's ultimately where I'll spend time. And then also I'll leverage that to say, now, you cannot move up until these people are capable of doing not only the job that you're managing, your job as well. And so I try to really illustrate that thread and how we work together up and down the hierarchical stack of whatever organization you're in.
Yeah.
That if you want to move up, you have to have somebody to fill your spot, whether it's you're hiring from the outside, whether you know it's you're promoting from within. And so by making that person accountable for creating people who can replace them, you sort of detach from the possession of, oh my gosh, I have to have all the control to do well. When in reality, I can't control you as another human being. I can only enable you in order to hit my goals. And so you try to work on breaking that control connection
Mhm.
and re-solder that onto an outcome connection. And whether I go zigzag to get from A to B or curly Q to get from A to B or straight line, the outcome is the most important. The
Yeah.
coaching is around maybe a curly cue might work better next time. Let's examine that. And so
Mhm.
I encourage those people who get really mired down in the how to, when the outcome has been achieved, or as you're doing touch points, you can coach on the how to say, it has worked for me in the past doing A, B, and C, but don't hold those people responsible for working like you. We just need the outcome, right? And something similar happens when you go, from the tactics into the strategic, whether it's that's into a director level, into a VP level, you have a similar thing because you have to get really comfortable with ambiguity because
Yeah.
you're the alchemist at that point. What is the strategy? How do I actually turn that into tangible action that people can do? And what are the things that I need to move out of the way? Who do I need to go work with? Who do I need to become friends with? And that sort of thing. So I take a similar approach whenever I'm coaching an executive on that to kind of let go, but it can be hard. And so a lot of what I'll do is make sure that they're incented based on whether it's a bonus that they're looking to check the boxes to get, whether it's a promotion, whether it's just some type of personal growth goal. Whatever that is, if you incentivize people to work together and to grow others, they'll do it.
Yeah, and I was gonna ask that question too. What other incentives do you use? And the thing that also came to mind was maybe the leader might not be confident that they have the right answer to
Mhm,
coach their team members, their employees on the how if it's different
mhm.
from what they do, right? So
Yeah.
if somebody turns left to get to the Starbucks and I turn right to get there, I might not know the path turning left. How do you coach somebody if you're not sure of the path to get there or how they've done it, but they've been successful? How do you still coach somebody even though you might not understand their process or their how?
That then becomes a search. So I don't, I'm very sensitive to the Dunning-Kruger graph, meaning I don't
Mm.
like to pretend that I'm an expert when I'm not. And so what I like to do is find the person who knows. So if it's somebody in the organization, I will make an introduction. If it is a YouTube channel, like I can't tell you how many times I have learned something new from YouTube because I was curious about how to present something financial to a CFO, for example. I It's not a strong suit of mine. And so I dug in and leaned in and found a resource to find that out. Maybe it's something as mundane as that. It might be a book, right? It's that's where it takes some level of curiosity to really get to the heart of, okay, if you're doing it a different way, show me. Let's see where you're having an issue, and then let me flex in the organization, in my network, online, and see where we can find a resource for you if I'm not the right resource. I think a lot of people assume that I have to know everything about your job if I can effectively lead you. And that's
Yeah.
not the case. That's a manager. If I'm going to manage somebody's tasks, okay, then yeah, I probably have to know all those things if I'm going to get down into the details and double check it. But
Yeah.
if you're doing that, stop it because it's not helping you or anyone else. But if I'm a leader, then it's the outcome that I worry about. And if I don't know how the detail, if I don't know how to do it at the detail level, when somebody has come to me and asking for help, or we know that there's smoke but we don't know where the fire is, then as a leader I should have this the be secure enough to say, you know what, I don't know how to do that. I can put you in contact with somebody who does, and they're really really good at it. And that's usually how I'll navigate around that, because not everything is mine to solve, but it
Mm,
is, some dots are mine to connect, and as a leader making sure that those connections happen is really important.
I love that. And in sales, I feel like that's kind of my role as well, is connecting the dots for people, is bringing in the right resources, the right people who have the right answers, and then being able to ask the right questions on the other side to the client to have that information to then bring back to our experts. But I love that answer. I think that's a great way to do it, and it shows again your enthusiasm for learning, your that how much you care about helping other people. I mean, it because that does take time out of your day, then to go look, read that book that's about a new process, or find a YouTube channel to be able to help somebody else. So it definitely takes a level of care and support from your end as well that I wanted to commend, or give thanks to or appreciate, because that is challenging. Not everybody can spend that extra time.
No, and that's okay, and it's okay if you if not, right? There are different leadership styles, and that's okay. But for me, I have found that works, and then I'm just naturally curious. So
Yeah.
poking around it like that is fun. So it scratches an itch,
Yeah.
and
Very cool.
I find things that I don't know, and now I know them.
So then we're talking about leadership, and we've built this team now. And something that I find challenging in my life is, in my personal life, kind of because in sales I'm kind of a one man show, but in my personal life, when I build this great team around me and then I get caught up in maybe addressing their needs before my needs, or how do you balance that, the needs of your team versus your own professional and personal goals?
That is a fantastic question, because I can tell you I have made this mistake where you over-index on, being for the people, right? There's that part of it, and you sort of lose sight of the bigger picture. And full disclosure, I still struggle with this. And so what I have found is being very intentional with my time around, I sit down on Sunday evening, every Sunday evening. Part of my for the week routine is, what are my goals for the week? And what, like, just three. I don't focus on more than that, because chances are Tuesday something's gonna trump one or two of them.
Yeah, exactly.
But I stack rank, what are the three main things that if I were to finish the week and feel successful, that I were to accomplish. And so as I start to unpack that, this is maybe a 30-minute exercise, by the way. Like, I don't overthink this. I try to think about, if I were to say 10% of my time, 20% of my time, like, what amount of time do I think I need to dedicate to this to get where I want to be? And I will go into my calendar and I'm ruthless about it. I will block out time. I'll either mark myself out of office, I will put myself on do not disturb. I will do what I need to do to block that time, because I'm not a physician and I'm not a lawyer, and I'm not doing things that are saving lives at this point. And
Yeah.
so, to that end, I have a really tangible amount of control over my time management. I will block off the time and use it for what I need to use it for. I'm also hyper aware of the fact that things take the time that we give it. I forget what law that is, but I try to make sure that I allow myself enough time, but not too much, to get to where I need to be. And so that is what I have started to do, I would say, over the past 3 or 4 years, where on Sunday evenings, just kind of taking that moment to frame my week and say, okay, this is what I want to get done, has really helped me make sure that I'm not spending so much time on the day to day with folks that I lose sight of the things that I'm accountable for, because ultimately that it's going to have a negative impact on the organization. It's going to have a negative impact on my team, because I'll be chasing my tail. And
Yeah.
so, the truth of the matter is that it's a balance and there is no set formula. Some weeks it's 4 hours and I'm good to go because in this industry, as you know, it ebbs and flows. In software development, it ebbs and flows. You have times where you're like, I am so like not busy this week. And then the following week, you could easily work 60, 70 hours, right? It's
Yeah.
just the nature of the beast. And so it's up to us to make sure that we really identify what is important to us. We are going to get it wrong at times, and that's okay. But when that happens, okay, pivot and go. And then, during some of that time on Sundays, if depending on whether it was a rough week the week before or I'm anticipating a rough week, I might reflect on what is actually important here, what is driving, what's driving things, just depending on what's going on. So that's how I navigate through that. I know it's a big challenge for leaders, especially people who lead with empathy, because you tend to way over rotate on the people side
Yeah.
and not so much on the objectives. What are we actually getting done? Let's get down to brass tacks and, maybe depersonalize it a little bit and
Yeah.
figure out, are we doing the things we need to do to be a successful organization and team?
Yeah. Yeah. And you're right. You said it, and I didn't know how to put it into words. I lead with empathy, and sometimes I get carried away with that, or I'm not able to separate that. And you talk about goal setting. You know, even in the new year, this year, my wife and I, we made all these new goals, and we really took a look at the goals we made last year and the goals we made this year, and tried to make them achievable. So I think that's important when goal setting is to actually get to achieve them, so that you want to make goals again and continue to go back. Can you talk about maybe how you create goals that are achievable for you, and how others can utilize that same philosophy to maybe create goals for themselves?
So some of my goals are achievable, some of them might not be, because I do feel like we need to kind of shoot for the moon in certain instances. I have landed flat on my face. So like there's risk there, but I'm very
Mm.
risk tolerant. That's one of the things that as I have had failures over the years, yeah, it hurt in the moment, but you know what? It didn't like I survived. I'm
Yep.
okay. My career survived, right? Again, we're not talking about egregious, illegal, like super irresponsible things,
Yeah.
but trying things and failing, while scary, it's not as painful as you might think. It is momentarily. It's like when you fall down or if you twist your ankle and you're like, oh my God, I'm never going to walk again. And then, 20 minutes later, you're like, okay, I can walk. This sucks, but I can do
Yeah.
it. And then in a couple of days, you're fine. You're back to playing whatever sport or, just
And you
walking if
forget
you're
the
me.
pain. Yeah.
And you forget the pain, right? But
Yeah.
you just kind of learn that, okay, the next time it happens, okay, I'll be fine in a little bit. Let me just breathe through this, right? And then
Mm.
slowly but surely, you become much more capable of navigating it because it doesn't hurt as bad as you feared it would. And so, to that end, like I do want to set a big goal. Like there are things that I want to do that may not be achievable, and I
Yeah.
try to chunk it up as best I can. So this is where product management comes into play, comes handy because I try to decompose it down into what are the things that I could potentially do to control this. Now, I also am very open to the fact that you can do everything right and still lose, and
Yeah.
that's okay. Like you can't control everything, and that's okay. And I think in this employment climate, that it's important for people to realize that, like it's okay if you did all of the right things and you didn't win. It just is how things. That's life, but learn what you can and move on to the next. And so when I set achievable goals, those are the short term. That's where like I'll
Mm.
take something super easy, like a financial goal. I'll look at the State of the Union. Let's say my husband and I want to go on a vacation or whatever. What do we need to save up? What are we wanting to do? And we will take those, pay period by pay period and pull it out and put it in whatever, given the time frame, we'll pull out whatever we need to, and then we'll book it and do our thing, right?
Yeah.
So whether it's a certification, whether it is getting something done so that another team can move on, or whatever that might be, try to make sure that the goals are really sliced up to where we've got some short term. Number one, I have ADHD and I need the dopamine. So I need to make sure that I've sliced it up to where I can be like, yes, I can check the box.
Yep.
Um, so that's how I approach it. And I always approach it to where it's not this nebulous thing. I want to be successful, right?
Yeah.
Because that gives me permission to lower the bar.
Mhm.
I want to make sure that by, the end of the year, I have met with these individual people and asked and gotten feedback on specific things I need to work on. And whatever those things are, I will set an action plan for, one or two of those to get better. Right. So, for example, I don't know a ton about AI. And I've talked to some folks and gotten some feedback out, in my external network. And they're like, you really should probably lean into that. It's something that, especially as product people, we need to learn. And so I've been taking some classes on, just intro stuff, right? Just because it's a goal that I have to be able to speak coherently inside any organization about how we might leverage artificial intelligence as a product organization. So that's like a small goal. A big goal is I might want to be a vice president. And if that's the case, what are the skill gaps that I have, and how might the things that I'm working on in the short term serve that long term goal? So I try to make sure I can decompose that big goal down into the things that I'm doing now. So I'm not just getting the short term fix, it is in service of a bigger picture. And that's how I decompose an epic.
I love
That's how
that.
I
Do you
decompose an initiative.
and that's what I loved about Agile and learning about all of that. It applied so much to my personal life. And I really
Mhm.
felt like I was growing professionally, but at the same time, I was taking leaps and bounds personally on how I address problems, on how I think about solving challenges and things of that nature, providing value quickly. How can I get to the shortest, quickest route to value? I think was something that I really learned that I tried to enact on this podcast, right? Limit the amount of obstacles that it's going to take me to get a podcast out, because that's the value. That's where people are gaining value. And then I can start to grow on it from there, learn from my mistakes. But I first need to get something of value out as fast as possible, right?
Yep.
And just a quick question: do you start at the big goal, like say your year goal, or do you start at the short term goals? Or like, do you start at the big and work back, or do you start at the short and move up?
I started the big and worked back. So I believe
Hmm.
that Stephen Covey, Franklin Covey, which
Yeah,
was
yep,
the
yep.
begin with the end in mind. Yes, that is for me, that's how it works. Because when I inevitably hit something I don't understand, or it starts to get hard, like we can do hard things, right? Having that end goal, it makes it worth the pain, and makes it, I absolutely just despise geometry. And like when I was in undergrad, right? Like I had to get through it because I had to get my degree. And
Yep.
so keeping my eye on that prize is what helped me get through the 6, 8 weeks that it took to, whatever, how much ever that time took to get through that portion of the class. And I
Yep.
sought help when I needed it. And, I took the test and took my licks when and I made it through just fine. But it was painful. And without having that goal, it makes you ask the question, why am I doing this to myself? Well, I'm doing it to myself because it's making me better at what I'm hoping to do in the future. And it's going to get me to that point. If I don't put myself through this, then I'm not going to be able to do the things that I'm setting out to do. And so beginning with the end in mind is really one of the things that's important to me. It also helps me prioritize because yes, the AI stuff is really interesting, but I'm easily distracted. And
Yep.
so, I might rabbit hole down into something
Yeah.
completely irrelevant, right? And so it helps me kind of bring myself back into focus and say, okay, well, yes, that might have been interesting. Is that in service of the overarching goal? If not, like maybe shelve it and come back to it as a lower priority. So I feel like having the bigger goal helps you prioritize, and you should prioritize again ruthlessly with how you're spending your time, how you're spending your energy, and what you're learning and what you're not learning, because there's an opportunity cost to all of it. If I'm
Mhm.
learning one thing, there's something else I could have been learning that I chose not to. And so I should make that choice based on some level of prioritization. And to me, it's the longer term goal. I theme out my year And so like
Nice.
I'm one of those word of the year people. And so
Yep.
my word this year is bold. And so,
Nice.
bold risks, make bold choices and, be bold about self advocacy, be bold about advocating for my team and that sort of thing, right? And so
Love that.
I try to theme that through in the smaller things that I'm doing. And then I'll ask myself, like, are you being a little cowardly here, Jamie? Are you taking the easy way? Or are you trying something interesting and different? And it's okay if it's easy sometimes. That's okay. You gotta be easy sometimes, but not every time.
Yeah, and this is the first year I've kind of gone in with a theme, and mine is the it's okay to fail, but it's not okay to not try. And that's kind of I'm taking everything I can, just all new stuff, anything I need to be successful. Just turned 30 this past year, and I felt like I was kind of hitting a plateau. Okay, I'm comfortable with where I am. I'm confident in the things I'm doing, but I didn't feel like I had a next step. Okay, what's this next big thing when I'm 40? What am I going to be able to say that I achieved over these 10 years? Because in your 20s, you're still growing, you're graduating from college, you're getting your first job. It was easy to hit those milestones, and now it's kind of like, okay, what's my next big milestone? And so my answer was I don't know, and so I need to
Mhm.
try 1,000 things to figure out what's my next big thing. And so that's kind of how I got into this year. But I wanted to go back real
That's
quick. You spoke about risk tolerance, and I
mhm.
think that's something that I struggle with. What is risk tolerance?
It is
Or
being
being risk tolerant?
comfortable. Yeah, it's being comfortable, not knowing the outcome. I'm okay jumping off a cliff if it's a 10-foot drop or if it's a 50-foot drop. I'm really hoping it's not a 100-foot drop.
Yeah.
But if it is, then, I try to make sure that I'm appropriately equipped to land safely. But if it's not, and it turns out to be a bigger risk, then the reward tends to be pretty good. When I fail, it doesn't hurt my ego like it used to. This is the beautiful part of being in your mid 40s is you have failed enough by then, or hopefully you have failed enough by now to where you are pretty confident that you don't know it all. And there's something really liberating with that because that is when the trying the new things for me became a lot easier and a lot more palatable if it turned out that I wasn't good at it. And so, excuse me. And so that level of risk tolerance, I think, is what I'll bring to a conversation sometimes when it comes to working with a client. Like, and this is when I really want to focus on the prioritization aspect because what you risk and how big you risk should be balanced with level of stability you have, right? Like I wouldn't make a big bold bet that would if it failed, if the consequence was we lost our house
Yeah.
or I lost a medical license or something like that, like I probably wouldn't go that far. And so when I am trying something new or when I am challenging to really experiment and see if something might or might not work, part of what I want to ask myself and clients and other people is what happens if it falls flat on its face. It might mean for a client we wasted $100,000. Somebody might tell you that, right? When in reality, you didn't waste it, you learned it, right? You've spent $100,000 to learn that had you invested $1 million, it would have been a big fat waste of money, right?
Yeah.
So, right? So, I mean, it's better to lose a little fast than lose a lot slowly. And then, making sure that I've got my house clean in order to be able to take that risk.
Yep.
So, I'm very risk tolerant, like with my career, for example. I will push back, I'll try different things. And that's largely because, there are some things in it that I've been able to do in my personal life to where if the most dramatic thing were to happen, I have planned for that. And so, there's security in that. And so for me to build up that risk tolerance, it wasn't just like, yes, okay, I got good at facing the pain because I failed enough. I'm not like a big fat complete failure, but
Yeah.
like I've made enough mistakes to know that yes, it's hard and we can do hard things. But I've also created enough stability, both personally and professionally, to be able to leverage some of that credibility and stability to take the risks to where if I lose it, it doesn't completely ruin everything. And so it's important to, when you look at the risk that you're taking, I think of the consequences, intended, unintended. What happens if it really, really fails? What happens if it really, really succeeds? And just kind of try to game that out as best you can, even though at the end of the day, you're looking at a crystal ball. You're trying to predict the
Yeah.
future and you can't do that. But what you can do is calculate as best you can so that you soften the blow of any failure. And then you also, keep in mind the engine that you've already got running, just keep that healthy as well. So that's how I created my risk tolerance. Not everybody is okay with that sort of thing
Yeah.
because you have some folks who they might be very early in their career and they're like, listen, if I fail, I could get fired and it would be really difficult to get another job. And I've got, XYZ going on.
Mhm.
Fair. I might be nearing retirement age. I do not want to take a big risk right now. I will help you take a risk, but for me it just doesn't fit with my life plan and my goals. So like it's part of it is where you are in your career also, and can your career handle you taking a big risk?
Yeah.
So long answer to a short question, but I wish more people would take more risks, but you know.
Again, you're reading my mind. So you're I think more people don't take that risk because again, back to the fear and stress that is put on us, right?
Mhm.
And sometimes you think you're taking a good risk that even if it fails, it's still, you're learning and it doesn't turn out the way you want and you have all this pressure and stress put on you. And I'm sure, it sounds like you've also found a way to deal with stress and pressure and that kind of thing because that kind of comes along with trying new things and being risk tolerant. But how would you give advice to somebody who, is afraid of that pressure and stress that comes with taking risks? How?
So I have been really, really, really fortunate. In my career, I have had some leaders who created the space for me to be able to do that. And so I really put a lot of pressure on senior leaders to create the air cover so that risks can be taken. And so to that end, if you are a senior leader and you're wanting to take a risk, you should be bold enough to have a conversation with your leader, or if you're seeking funding for something, you should be able to have the information and detail that you need to make a coherent argument for funding of an experiment. Or if you have your own P&L, you should have a very logical case for why you made a decision that you made. And everybody is accountable to someone. And I don't necessarily think there's a ton of value in doing stuff in secret or in a vacuum unless you're a startup and you're in stealth mode, right?
Yeah.
With that notwithstanding, I'm just talking about like normal day-to-day stuff. I think that it's incumbent upon your leader to create the space for that type of thing. One of my very first bosses, Mike, I listen, no offense to like my current employer, but if he called me today and said he had a job, I'd leave like that because I, I learned in my early 20s, he was a visionary, still is. He created air cover for his organization to know exactly what was needed to be successful. And then here's the space for risk and here's the space for experimentation. Who's in? And so it was an open invitation. It wasn't necessarily requiring me to push and push, right? Because not everybody's an extrovert. Not everybody was raised in a way where they felt free to be able to do that, right? So there's
Yeah.
privilege that comes with that kind of approach. And so what I always admired about what he did was he created space for people to do these things quietly, or for people to do things where it wasn't in front of God and country, but it was still a risk for them. And
Yeah.
so I put a lot of pressure on leaders to do that, to where if there's a risk in your organization, you don't always have to be the superhero. It's perfectly fine for your direct reports to be super successful, and your joy should come from going, ta-da, look at
Yeah.
this amazing person on my team, and then that person put them in the spotlight, because that does not take away from you as a leader. if nothing else, it shows that you are really freaking good at it, and you have created depth in your organization and credibility to know that it's not just they're hiring you to work. They're hiring this culture and this group of experts to work, right? And
Yeah.
so it all goes for me, it all goes back to leaders because, when Mike left, I was heartbroken. But I got so lucky where, the person who followed him was fantastic. Now I've had some crap leaders too. So it wasn't all sunshine and daisies.
Yeah.
But but I did get really lucky with being having that modeled for me where, you've got the very clear next steps, and for people who are interested in taking risks and trying new things, there was safety in that. But there was also discomfort because if you screwed up or if you needed to be course corrected, it wasn't always, "Oh, good job, here's a grade A sticker," right? It was you had to hear some hard things, but
Yeah.
you do hard things.
Yeah. And I think feedback, good and bad feedback from leadership and what you're saying is extremely important. I found that at Nexient, that was the kind of the first time I was able to have real conversations with leadership about, hey, these are the things I'm seeing, these are the challenges I'm having, and get honest and positive feedback. And sometimes it wasn't all positive, but put me in the positive direction, right? It wasn't, you know, and so I think feedback is really important to as a leader. And so how do you manage giving good and bad feedback, and kind of going back to the empathy thing, how if you need to tell somebody something difficult, how do you handle that as a leader?
So I am a very direct person, and that is not for everyone. And not everybody will be direct with me, unfortunately. So I try to, when I'm talking to a leader and I'm asking for feedback, I give overt permission. Like, listen, I want to know, I'm comfortable with what I'm good at. What I need to understand is what I'm bad at. Where am I missing things? Like, what do I need to work on to close certain gaps? And so I don't like to spend a lot of time when I'm receiving feedback knowing what I did well, other than, yes, that was great. Okay, cool. Let's move on to the thing that I messed up because that's where I really want to spend my energy.
Right.
When giving feedback, I try to make sure that I have gotten to know the person well enough to understand how they want to be treated. And I
Mm.
typically just ask, how do you want to receive feedback? Do you want me to be direct? Do you want me to, like the proverbial wrap sandwich, right? Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
I ask them how they want to be treated. And I have found that that conversation has allowed me to construct the feedback in a way that's meaningful for them to receive. So, for somebody who wants things to be a little bit more soft, a lot of times what I'll do is, well, regardless of the way I'm delivering it, is let's look at the situation. Because unless you have just been a brilliant jerk, which we'll have that conversation too if we need to, most people, their intent is to do a good job. I have never met an employee who was like, you know what I'm here to do? I'm here to screw everything up.
Yeah.
Like, nobody is actually trying to do that, right? And so intent really matters. And so what I try to do is really get to the heart of, okay, here's the situation and here's the outcome that we have. One of the things we need to talk about is here, in this specific space, this was the choice that was made. Walk me through the thought process because I try to understand what was chosen and when and why, and then we'll course correct. And I'll let them know, here's the mistake as I see it, and here's what I've heard from other people. So here's kind of, in the future, these are the things that we need to work on. And that way, I'm not just saying, "You screwed up and don't ever do it again," right? Because they know we all know when we screw up, it feels like friend.
Yeah.
And so, like, you know, and if I'm mad about it, which I have been before, I will not talk about it. I'll be like, listen, I'm gonna schedule some time for next week. Let's just kind of, you're not gonna get fired. I will outright say that, like, if I'm not gonna fire somebody, I will tell that I don't want somebody fearing all weekend or stewing all weekend or whatever. Like, I don't want it to go that long. If
Yeah.
emotions are really high, we will put it on the shelf for a couple of days so that we can have as objective a conversation as possible. Because the goal is to understand what's the behavior, what was the problem cause solution, what was the issue, what was the mistake that caused it, what's the course correction? And that's just how I've tended to approach those things. And when you're talking about the situation, it makes it a lot easier to speak with the person and to hear it whenever you're not being attacked as a human being. It's, this is a situation and you should have handled it differently and here's why. So, not everybody's brain is the same, right? And some people don't understand why certain behaviors are not okay. And so it's also because you're going to have neurodivergent people, you're going to have people of all different ages. It's
Yep.
also important to make sure that the why is understood clearly, even if it's just the facts. That way that person, can learn and hopefully not make the same mistake again.
And you brought up another Franklin Covey saying, which is seek to understand before being understood. And you've actually mentioned that a few times, I think, that during this podcast of just that philosophy, right? Is and I try to enact that in my relationships and my personal life too. Even in the podcast, asking good questions, really being curious, like you said, having that curious mind. I think that has done so much for me in the short time since I started at NTT in June in this program, and have been learning just more and more about how to communicate with people, how to ask good questions, how your intent is so important, and somebody else might have a different perception of your intent. So you have to think about both, how you're coming across and how people are receiving it. I think that's I love that, and I noticed that of you at Nexient in your leadership style, and that's again why it was so great to be able to have you on the podcast. And Jamie, this has been a fantastic conversation. I wanted to close out with just, do you have a good quote or saying that you go by or you think about when thinking about staying positive or having positive momentum?
I said it earlier and I didn't mean to because I was totally going to save it for that question, but it just came out. It's that there is enough sunshine for everyone. And, there's another one that I don't even know if it's a quote more than it is a philosophy, and it just keeps me humble. And
Yeah.
that's that the walls of the company will not crumble if I am not under its roof.
Yep.
Because, and it's sounds a little cynical, but it helps keep me grounded. That so that I don't get grandiose or I don't get self-important because everybody we've all got egos, right? Like
Yep.
you got to keep it healthy, but don't start thinking you're so important that if you leave, operations can't go forward,
Yeah.
right? So it's that to kind of keep perspective, and then there's enough sunshine for everyone. It is incumbent upon us as leaders to make sure that if I win the lottery tomorrow, that my organization is healthy. And if I were to be like deuces and somebody had to fill in, that it gives me great comfort to know that I could think of 4 people right off the top of my head that would be a perfect fit, right? And so that is not a threat to me at all because I'm comfortable with what I'm good at. There's so much work to be done that I don't have to be the star of the show. There's enough sunshine for everybody. And when other people feel success, it makes me feel like Evan amazing whenever I see somebody in my charge, slingshot and just
Yep.
go right up like to the moon. To me, that
Love
that
that.
is that is reflective on me. So that's kind of how I try to keep a positive attitude. It's
Yeah,
keep
that's
myself
awesome.
humble.
Awesome, Jamie. I love it. Well, thank you again so much for spending your time with me today. This was a fantastic conversation, and keep doing your best out there. And thank you
You
again.
too. Thank you so much for having me. I'll talk soon.
Thanks, Jamie.